Liam Martin, formerly of WBZ, and now what's the name of the firm you're working at right now?
Newsmaker Marketing.
Newsmaker Marketing. Okay, so I came across your article that you wrote for Boston Magazine, and I was just saying this before we started, that I'm reading it and I'm like, yep. 7 o'clock bedtime, getting up at 2 a.m. Yep. That's literally my life.
Yep.
Literally my life. So okay. Because the whole thing with this podcast is passion and people chasing their passion and the ups and downs, how it's not easy. You grew up. Your microphone okay over there?
It's like it went flaccid for a moment.
Oh, there you go. Tug on it a couple times. No, but how did you grow up in the area? You grew up in Massachusetts?
I grew up in Cohasset and Hull. Parents still down there on the South Shore, brother in Hingham, another brother in New Hampshire. We're Massachusetts and New England through and through.
Okay, so like good family, supportive, all that stuff.
Super supportive. When I got into this, both my parents were as proud as can be. When I got back to Boston, and they're telling everyone, my son's on the news now, and great family, super supportive.
Because the thing that people don't understand, if you're not into like the broadcasting industry, is if you grow up like in a big city like Boston, and you're like, oh, I want a job in the news or a radio or whatever, the chances that you're going to get a job, your first job in the big city, are very small. You usually have to go to a smaller city. Mm-hmm. Mama can't find you Michigan or whatever. Work your way up and eventually work your way back to the big city. So you started off where when you got into doing news?
First job was in Lansing, Michigan.
Lansing, Michigan. There you go.
15.
Okay.
Yep.
And you were there for how long?
I was there for 3 years.
Yeah.
So initially my plan was there for a year and then try to move up to a middle market.
Yeah.
But I met my wife. She was getting her PhD at Michigan State.
Okay.
And so kind of hitched my wagon to her. And she was finishing up the PhD. And so I said, I think this is going to be forever. And so I'm going to stay here, do my 3 years, and kind of take that time when I would have been jumping up to a middle market and just continue to grow here. And then was able to go from Lansing to Boston.
So you meet your wife, PhD in what?
Psychology.
Okay.
Yeah, I always joke I'm her number one client.
Yeah. So you explained to her, hey, by the way, with my job, the chances of just like settling down and getting a house and making this our forever home are not great right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was making $27,000 a year.
Right.
$27,000 a year as the weekend, and that was with an anchor position. I was the weekend anchor, weekday reporter. So the 3 days of the week when I was a reporter, I would have my own camera, my own live truck, and I would go out and do all my own shooting and editing right out there in the field. And then weekend anchor, I would come in. I mostly produced the show too, wrote a lot of it, picked out what we were going to be doing. I was always working with some super rookie producer, which I was a rookie too. And we'd just the two of us work on the show together. I'd often be doing the sportscast myself too. So I'd go into a little sports studio and ingest whatever high school game video we had that week or Michigan State games or whatever, edit it myself, write that. And then I would get on set and anchor the entire news and sportscast using a little foot pedal to roll my teleprompter.
Yeah. It's funny how like when you're doing it, you're like, this is awesome. I'm doing all this stuff. You're like, it's almost like pile it on. It's awesome. And then you look at it later and you're like, I can't believe I was doing all that crap for such little money.
And you look at it later and you're also like, wow, I was terrible.
Yeah.
Because you think that you know what you're doing at that point and you don't yet. And then each year you kind of look back on the year before and go, oh, wow, I was pretty bad. But what you don't realize is in that moment, you're also pretty bad.
Right.
And then over time, maybe you get to not so bad.
Yeah, just by accident, just with more reps, you get
more reps,
less bad. Yeah. Okay, so for 3 years, and then what were you doing? Did you send a tape to Boston? Did they?
Yeah, so I had hired an agent, and because I knew I had a very specific set of cities that I would go to next because I wanted to get back to New England. My then girlfriend and I were going to get married. And so we wanted to try to do what we could to get back here and plant roots. So I was really confined to Hartford, Providence, Boston, and Manchester. So I only was going to apply to those 4 markets. I figured I wouldn't get Boston. And so I would go to one of those smaller markets in the area and then try to work my way up to Boston eventually. But I got lucky and had this chance to go be a freelance reporter at Channel 5.
Okay.
They said, why don't you? In fact, they flew me in and they put me on the air as a test.
Really?
I didn't even have the job yet. They just said, you're here, you do the interview, go on the air for a day. Because I was so green and still really young. I think I was 26 or 27, which at that time would have been very young to hire a reporter. So they didn't have total faith in me yet, understandably. And so they just put me on the air for a day. And I did some story about some teenagers that were waiting in the woods in Carver and hitting cars with paintballs. And I did well enough that they said, okay, we will hire you on a freelance basis.
Yeah.
You'll work as many days as we have available to you, but you're going to have to move back to Boston. So I said to my wife, this is the best chance I have of growing and making this work. I worked, overnights, and then the next day I'd be working the night shift, and then the next day would be the morning shift, and I'd work Saturdays and Sundays. Whenever they had available for me, I did. And I lived with my mom for that time because I wasn't sure it was going to work. And then about a year into doing that freelance position, they offered me a staff reporter position at Channel 5.
When you're doing freelance, is it like, I'm picturing Peter Parker, sorry. But like, do you like come to them and go, hey, I have this story on this, and they're like, we'll take it or not, like J. Jonah Jameson? Or is it them saying, hey, Liam, go to whatever and check out what's going on with somebody shooting paintballs at cars?
It's the second of those two.
Yeah.
So it's they say, hey, we need a nightside reporter on Monday. And so you come in at 3:00 and you join the editorial meeting. Ideally, you're pitching something. So you've been following the news, talking to people, trying to see if there's a good story to pitch. But in a market as big as Boston, where there's always something going on, you're going to get assigned. And so you walk in, you give a pitch. Sometimes it works. Most of the time they go, you're going to the fire that just broke out in Watertown. Go ahead. And then, you're on the air 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news. And then start it all over again the next day.
Okay. So then when they hired you officially, what's the difference between
So officially, when you're hired in your staff, you're 5 days a week. You know what your schedule is going to be. It's pretty consistent. But even then, you can have a fair amount of variability in, hey, we need you to switch to the night shift today, or we need you to switch to the morning shift. So it's more consistent, but it's still not totally consistent, especially when you're lowest rung on the ladder.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to get, your official anchor? Because that's like when you look at the evolution, like in radio, it's like mornings is like the main event. Yeah. So for news, it's like, I want to be the anchor guy for the mornings, for the afternoons.
Yeah. So what happened is I was at Channel 5 as, a general assignment reporter.
Yeah.
And then I was about a year and a half into that contract, and WBZ reached out to me and said, hey, we've got an anchor position open. We'd love to interview you for it. And I was floored. I never thought I would anchor the news in Boston. I really didn't. I mean, that was like a dream.
Yeah.
But my thought was, I will just kind of pound the pavement. I'm happy. I love the job. If I'm a reporter for the rest of my career, I will love that. It's a great job. And they reached out to me and said, we have an evening position open to be the number 2 evening anchor. And so I went, I interviewed, and somehow I got it. And so at like 29, 30 years old, whatever it was, WBZ hired me away from 5 to be the number 2 evening anchor.
And this is when you thought you made it. You're like,
I got it. I couldn't believe it.
I got it.
And so then I went over there, and then I was the number 2 evening guy for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And 5 years in, they said, hey, we're interested in having you move to the mornings.
Yeah.
And it was perfect timing for me because I had my daughter at the time was 5. She was starting school. She was in kindergarten. And if I had stayed on that evening shift, I really wouldn't have seen her much because, you go in at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you're home around midnight. So once you get them off to school, that's it. You don't see them for the rest of the day if you work that shift. And I was kind of staring that down and trying to think of, am I going to be okay with that? Am I going to be okay with not seeing my kids? And my son at that point was 2. And here came this opportunity to move to the mornings where yes, you're up at 2:00 in the morning, but you're home by the time they get off the school bus. You can take them to their after school stuff. I was coaching their teams. And so I thought, this is perfect. It's a great position. It's lots of visibility to the public. It's a fun show. You get to kind of, let loose a little bit. And I'm going to be there for my kids. So I thought, this is a dream scenario.
When you were doing the afternoons before you got to mornings, like, would your wife say stuff to you, or like when you guys would have a talk about like, this is a tough schedule, would it be you bringing it up to her, or her being like, hey, your kids are growing up here and all you do is see them in the morning?
She never had to remind me of that. It was I was the one bringing it up. I was the one that was starting to feel the guilt about it. She's always been supportive in the sense of, whatever you've got to do, you do it, and we'll deal with the rest of it as it comes.
Yeah.
It was much more me saying, I don't know that I want to continue to do this once they're in school. And then the morning position opened up, and it seemed like we had a great solution.
Yeah. But it still wasn't.
But it was pretty brutal.
This is your passion. You got it. You're like, I got what do they say? The brass ring? I got the brass ring. And then you're like, the schedule sucks.
Yeah.
Because I know. Go ahead. Tell you the schedule. Listen, I know the schedule.
Yeah.
I know. When I read this, I was like, oh, a man after my own heart.
Well, what time are you up in the morning?
2.
Yeah.
I get up at 2. But I have a whole okay, so my attitude's a little different. Like, I'm very much like, I understand everything you're saying, but in my head, I was always like, that's just shit you got to go through. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I get up at 2. I kind of set up my day to be in the best. Okay, picture a blank piece of paper.
Yeah.
That blank piece of paper is your life. Stuff could happen, but I want to put in as much there to set myself up for a good day or a good life as possible. That way, when the stuff does happen, I'm more prepared for it. So I call it starting your day on a back foot, which a lot of people do, where they're like, the alarm goes off and they hit snooze and they get up at the last minute, and then they're kind of rushing to get going for the day, and then they get to work and they're kind of like already a little bit behind, and then something comes up and now that throws them off too. So I'll get up at 2. I work out, shower, all that stuff. I would do that in the morning before I even went into work, and people are like, well, why? You get off at this time. You could do it in the afternoon. And I say, yeah, but you know what? At 2:30 in the morning, if somebody is texting me or if somebody's trying to contact me at 2:30 in the morning, it's an emergency. At 2:30 in the afternoon, people will call you, text you, email for nothing.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that I have that time to myself. I'm very disciplined to get in, what I need to do. And I feel like I'm starting my day off, in a good way, because I know later on there's going to be some craziness. Like, I set in time, for a nap. It's kind of a pain in the ass to be with me. So my wife is like yours, where she was just very much like, figure out what you got to do for your schedule, and we'll almost like work around it, which it makes you feel guilty in a way,
Yeah.
But it's...
Well, how long's your nap? Let me ask that.
My nap, depending on the day, I try. So I'm big now. We actually talked about this before we started too, on how sleep is such a big thing. And now people are finding out more and more how important sleep is. So I have like my little fitness tracker, and I try, on a good day, I try and give myself 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And in that 90 minutes, I get anywhere, let's say an hour, give or take, because it's not like I put my head down and pass out. But that's not always. Sometimes I try and do at least an hour. Set it for at least an hour where I could nap.
Yeah.
And then I have a room in my basement that is the darkest room you will ever. It's like my little movie room, but it has no windows.
Yeah.
So I go in there, I turn off the light, and I can't even find the couch.
Yeah,
so it's like darkness. So when I'm down there, it's beautiful. And then, then I get up and start part 2 of my day, phase 2, which is getting the kids from school, bringing them to,
So when you wake up from
stuff.
a 60-minute nap, though, if I did that, if I went anything past 20 minutes, I'd wake up and I wouldn't know what century it is. Really, I would wake up and go, what is happening? Where am I? My schedule was similar to yours in that I'd get up at 2. Now, I wasn't working out. I did that after the nap.
Yeah.
But I would wake up at 2, get myself ready for work, and then, do the show, do all that. If I was going out to tell a story, I'd go do that. And then I'd leave the studio around 11:30. I mean, it's a dream in that way.
Yeah.
And then I'd get home, I'd take a quick 20-minute nap.
Oh,
Wouldn't even take the clothes off. You're just lying on the bed,
dude.
boom, 20 minutes. I set the alarm for 30, so 10 minutes to fall asleep, do my breathing exercises, wake up, and feel like I was ready to go for the rest of the day. But it's funny because it didn't matter what I did. I could take a nap. I was taking supplements to try to help with sleep. I had a sunrise alarm clock where it would create light in the room to trick my body into thinking it was morning.
That is the worst thing for people with our schedule. My wife was like, let's get one of these that slowly increases the sound of the alarm. I'm like, Nicole, are you crazy? If I could get the alarm to punch me in the face. I have my alarm. You know what I do? I have an old school alarm with the radio dial.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I set it in between stations, so I just get loud static when it goes off. So a lot of times my body at this point kind of wakes me up around that time anyway.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'd wake up a little before the alarm and I'm just like, let me just get up now. But if the alarm goes off, I shoot up. Do you ever see the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember there was a scene where he has the dummy in the bed to fool everybody?
Yeah.
So there's a scene where his sister's looking for him and she's pissed off and she kicks the door to his bedroom and the dummy just shoots up.
That's you.
That's my existence. My alarm goes off. I shoot up. I shut it off. I set myself up in a way where it's like I do certain things automatic in the morning. Mm-hmm. So there are times that I will literally kind of wake up in the middle of my workout or something. That's when I'm just like, okay, wait, I'm awake now. But I've been doing everything I needed to do on autopilot up to that point.
Yeah.
But dude, okay, so ready? Okay, here's the thing. Here's the trick. I mean, it's not like you can go back now, or maybe if you decide to go back. Here's the waking up from a nap trick, because that used to happen to me. I started off going 20, 30, 45. The older I got, how old are you?
40.
I'm 48. Okay.
Yeah.
So I used to bang out the 20, then I needed 30, then 40, and I used to always say I can't do an hour. Now I could do 90 minutes on my head if I had a chance. But the key is having something to do, setting it up or whatever, right after your nap. Because if you don't, it's easy to be like, oh, I didn't get enough sleep. Let me set it for another half hour or whatever.
Yeah.
So I always set it up that I have to do something after my nap. So it's almost like, get up, idiot, because if not, this isn't going to get done. So it's you got
a hack.
You got to trick yourself.
Yeah.
You really do.
So I guess my point is there was a checklist of 10 to 15 things that I had built into this routine over time to try to minimize the effects.
Yeah.
And yet I still felt like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I still felt foggy and I still didn't feel like myself. And, I'll own the fact that long before I had this schedule, I had mental health problems. I mean, I've had mental health problems since as long as I can remember. Obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression.
Like you were diagnosed with those?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so I can't blame it entirely on the schedule. What I know for sure is that they were exacerbated by waking up at 2:00 in the morning, and there was no way around it. I could try to blunt that as much as possible with 20-minute naps and sunrise alarm clock. And I was using one of those sad lamps to help me wake up in the morning. You'd put it on there's another good hack is you put it on your counter in the bathroom as you're shaving or whatever, getting ready for the day. And it puts those lights into your eyes and makes your body think it's morning.
Sad lamps?
Yeah, they're those therapy light lamps.
Okay.
They're like $45 on Amazon, and you just put them right on the counter.
Yep.
While you're getting ready, and it puts that light into your eyes and tricks your brain into going, okay, time to wake up. It's morning.
Right.
So the number of things I was doing in a day to try to account for this schedule was unbelievable. It was like every day I was learning something new about how to manage this thing.
Yeah.
And then 3 years in, I still was really struggling, and I had to eventually come to terms with the fact that there was no amount of, jerry-rigging my life that was going to make this okay. I just couldn't do it. There are some people my co-anchor, Kate Merrill, is a robot. Like
Yeah.
she's been doing this for 10 years, something like that. And she's in bed at 6:30 every day. Alarm goes off at 2. She's up. She's got a whole system and it works for her. And some people, there are night nurses, there are overnight police officers, security guards, people who find a way. Sometimes just by necessity. They are miserable, but they have to do it. And then for other people, they're just built a little differently and they're okay with that schedule and their body adjusts or whatever. But I had to just finally accept the fact that wasn't me.
Yeah. So you wrote in the article that you were on vacation with your family and you kind of just like had a little bit of a meltdown.
Yeah.
So it was because you were like, I want this all the time, or
there was a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Yes, it was mostly just being, the way I described it was it felt like a storm in my brain all the time. And it would ebb and flow, but it was there at least in some way all the time. I felt super sad, just waves of depression, and my obsessive compulsive disorder that I had largely gotten under control. And obsessive compulsive disorder is super misunderstood. A lot of people think of it as someone has to keep things neat.
Yeah.
Or they have to color coordinate. That is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. That is OCPD. And those are the people, it's a much less impactful disorder on your life. And a lot of people have OCPD.
Yeah.
My wife, she hasn't been diagnosed, but she's got to have things in a certain order. She doesn't like her food touching, that's OCPD. OCD are the people that do the light switches and
like you have to like go click, 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 click like a certain amount of times or whatever.
Yes, there are, and it can be behaviors like that.
Yeah.
Light switches and saying certain things over and over again in their mind.
You're making me sound like I feel like I have OCD now, because I'll do certain things like, this is stupid, but like when I put my deodorant on, I have to like swipe the same amount of times on both sides.
Yes.
I have to there's just certain things with my getting ready routine that I have to do in a certain order, certain amount of, like if I don't see, but I've never not done it that way, but I feel like it would bother me if I didn't.
Yeah. So that would be, I know way too much about this stuff because of my own experience. And obviously for anyone listening, I'm not a licensed therapist or psychologist, so take it all with a grain of salt. Yeah, that sounds like you might have OCD light. The big difference with OCD is that if you don't do that thing, it causes you a great amount of distress.
Yeah. Like you can't stop thinking about it.
Can't stop thinking about it. It raises your stress level immensely.
Yeah.
And what'll happen is, so because if you want to go up and down twice with the deodorant stick on your armpit, okay?
Yeah.
Let's say that's your routine.
12 times.
Oh, it's 12 times. Okay, wow, that's a lot of deodorant.
I don't want to stink. I literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I guess
six each.
Six each. Yeah,
okay, that sounds reasonable. 12 would be the. You know,
yeah, 6. I count the up and down as 2 separate ones. Yeah.
You're gonna have like frosting on your armpits.
Walking around like this. What is it called? Invisible lat syndrome. When the guys will walk around like they are in the gym.
People, instead of sweat stains, you just have white stains. On their shirts. So the difference there is that if you didn't do it, it would cause you a great amount of distress, and you would, if you were full blown OCD, you would have to go back and redo it.
Yeah.
And for some people, they imagine something bad's going to happen if they don't do it that way. There can be all kinds of stuff. Those behavior OCD traits, and I have those for sure, are somewhat easier to treat because you can use exposure therapy to deal with them. And so an exposure therapy in that scenario would be very easy. You just don't do that number of swipes on your armpit. You do 5 instead. And then you sit with it and you let your anxiety about it come and you let it go. And then you move on with your day and you don't go back and reapply the deodorant in the way that you wanted to. Okay. Yeah. So you're teaching your body to deal with that level of stress. What I really struggled with over time, because I was able to get those behavior issues under control. The light switches, I had certain sayings that I had to say at night or something bad was going to happen. I could I could manage those. I was able to go to therapy and deal with those. The intrusive thoughts OCD is much tougher to tackle because they're thoughts and they're not something that you can easily expose yourself to. And if you try to do something like that on your own, you could create more problems. It could be counterproductive. So I was having all kinds of intrusive thoughts and it felt like a storm was in my mind. And that breakdown that I had on Cape Cod that I wrote about in the Boston Magazine piece was about just breaking down from that storm and just feeling the weight of it. You know, here we are on Cape Cod. It's my favorite place on earth. I've been going there since I was a boy because my grandmother lived on Cape Cod, and now that her little cottage in South Yarmouth has passed down into the family. And here I was, I had, you know, my 2 kids, my beautiful wife. Here we are in Cape Cod. I've got a week off from the craziness of the schedule, and yet I was feeling awful and dealing with the intrusive thoughts and the storm that was going on. And that was when I took a moment. Yeah, everyone else was getting ready for the beach, and I just went outside and was just by myself crying. And I put that in the piece because it was an insight into, one, you know, how badly I was doing, and 2, that I was keeping it a secret from everyone, including my wife. And the reason I had stepped outside was so that she wouldn't see. And it took me a long time to open up even to her. And I think the reason for that is that men struggle to express these things and to be vulnerable, and to, you know, there's a fear of being weak or perceived as weak, and I had a real fear of being a burden. You know, if I tell my wife I'm going through this, especially while we're here on vacation, everyone's supposed to be having fun, it's supposed to be light. If I'm pulling her aside into the bedroom and saying, hey, I'm really struggling here, it ruins her vacation. At least this is how I saw it in my mind.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until we were on a different vacation, like a couple's vacation, just the 2 of us, the kids were back home, where I was in a really dark place. And I finally just felt like I have a moment here where I can put this on her, and it's gotten bad enough that I need to explain. And I couldn't keep the veil on anymore. I was very good at pretending everything was fine.
Yeah.
For a living, I'm sure it's the same with you. You got to come on with energy every day onto the radio. And when you're struggling with something in your life, you know, even someone that doesn't have mental health issues, you know, something shitty happened on your way to work. You found out your mom is sick with something.
Yeah.
You can't really bring that on the air. You have to be the guy that people want you to be on Hot 96.9
Yep.
or on WBZ, and have a fun, light morning show that helps people get started for their day. They're counting on you for that.
I call myself a human appliance. I'm like, at best, you want people to get up and start their day and be like, let me put my toast in my toaster, whatever, turn my coffee on, turn the radio on. It's like you want to be part of like the people's routine in the morning. And, you know, because I've been on so long, I've gone, people know about me having kids, getting married, getting divorced, getting remarried, having kids, my ex-wife passing away when she was going through a brain. I talked about all that stuff on air, but so, and for me, that's kind of like a therapy type of thing. I'm like, if I'm talking about it, it's a way of, it's almost like, you know, when they say you feel a certain way, write it down or talk about it, it makes you feel a little better. But even though when I've talked about a lot of stuff, there's still, like you said, there's just still certain things that sometimes you're just having a shitty little streak of time in your life. And you don't want to go in there and be like, guys, you know, I'm having one of those days, because your job is to make everyone else is going through that too. And your job is to make them, you know, improve their mood.
Yeah. And at least that's the way I saw it, you know, and I think there's real, one of the discoveries I've had as I've gone through all this is that there's real value to vulnerability. There's real value to us sitting here as 2 guys having this conversation that men typically don't have. And I remember the first time I told my best friend that I had been going through this, and he was, number one, shocked because, again, I had done a pretty good job of hiding it. And then 2, he was really sad that I hadn't told him and that I hadn't felt comfortable enough This is my best friend. I've known him since before I can remember anything. That I didn't feel comfortable coming to him and saying, I'm really struggling. And he then said, you know, I've actually been struggling with this or that. And it ended up leading to this conversation about stuff that, as two guys that had known each other for 35 years, we had never connected in that way. And that's a big part of the reason I wrote the piece, was just to say to people, hey, women create these tribes. They you know, are on text chains with one another, and they go out to dinner and they talk about these things. My husband did this, and I'm having this problem in my life, and they create this little tribe for one another. And guys don't really do that. Like, we'll go to the sports bar and we'll, you know, our text chains are all like funny memes and videos, and we're making fun of one another. We have fun and we have our own way of communicating, and that's great. But we don't really let one another in that way, typically.
Right.
And I think we should. I think it's a disservice to ourselves that we don't do this. And it's just such this, it's such a relic of, you know, biology and this feeling that you can't be vulnerable and you can't show that weakness, or you're going to be subject to a predator or whatever it might be. It's all that shit that's still in there. And I've been spending the better part of the last year trying to unravel that a little bit and be a bit more open. And if I'm having a shitty day, I say to my wife, hey, today's I'm not having a good day. You know, and we've come up with our own language to try to, you know, communicate it without scaring the kids or whatever. But it's, I think so much of tackling all this stuff, whatever issue you might have, is just being willing to recognize that it's happening, communicate it to the people in your life, and then you can move on from there.
It's funny because when you said the story about you and your best friend, I was thinking, with guys, we don't open up until like one of us opens up, and then we open up. Yeah. And when you said the same thing with your best friend, you're like, I told him this, and he's like, shit, I'm going through stuff like that too. And that's how it is with me and my friends. It's like we could sit there and be BSing about whatever, and we're talking about like deep stuff. It's not like we're just being super surface, but like until one of us is found, you know, is like, you know, whatever, something at work or something, you know, with one of their kids or a wife or just anything, you know, until one person does the 10 seconds of courage thing. Once they do it, all of a sudden someone else is like, oh my God, me too. And you kind of open up about it, and no one, once the door's open, nobody's like, come on, man, grow up, you know?
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, like with me, a lot of the things that you're talking about, I mean, it's the same thing I struggle with, but I'm still like, even now listening to you, I struggle with like, yeah, I mean, I feel that same way too, but it's just like, sometimes in life you just gotta suck it up a little bit and keep it moving, and if it's something you really like, I'll tell my kids, you know, I have kids, you know, my son's 25, I have a 19-year-old, I have a 17-year-old, and then I got 6 and 5.
Wow.
Yeah. 3 different women. I'm Puerto Rican. I know. I fit the profile.
You said it.
Yeah, no, but what I'll say to them, well, I've told my older kids at least, is, you know, like my son, he's out of college, and my other daughter, she's in college now, and my other daughter's looking at colleges. And I'll say, hey, listen, if there's something that like you love, just experience it and see if you can get through the shitty parts of it, because I don't care what it is you want to do. There's shitty parts of it. So when you experience the shitty parts, and then be honest with yourself and say, okay, is this something that do I love this that much to deal with this shittiness? And, you know, then make your decision, because if you're just looking for something that you're going to love all the time, and you're never going to have a bad day at it, you're never going to find anything.
Right.
You know, and so anyway, that's the way I kind of justify it to myself, with my schedule being crazy and, you know, the business the way it is. And it's funny, when I read your article, I was talking to my 17-year-old about it, and I told her I was going to talk to you, and I was saying to her, and I go, you know, it's crazy. I go, I have the same schedule, And I, will often be like, man, there's certain things that I'm missing out with my kids because, I try not to miss out, but there's some things that happen like a little bit later, and I'm like, oh, that's gonna throw me off for the next day or whatever. And she said, I don't know. I mean, I look at it as there's a lot of things that you ended up doing that you wouldn't have done if you didn't have that schedule. Like after school things, like bringing my kids to the activities. She's like, otherwise it would probably have been like, hey, have a good day at school. Not seeing you. And then at night, how was school? Great. All right. Good night.
Right.
So I try and shift my perspective that way. Because then otherwise I drive myself crazy.
And that's valid. And that was, that was the reason I moved to the morning schedule, like I was saying, was so that I could get them off the bus and I could deal with their after school activities and get my son to karate and my daughter to gymnastics and do all that stuff. The problem I found was that when I was there, I was, 60% of myself.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to experience it in the way that I wanted to. And again, these things, it's so individual, for you, it's obviously worked and you've raised these great kids.
It's mostly worked. I mean, I've been divorced.
Precisely.
It's like now, now with my wife now, it's worked a lot better. I used to be so work focused. The reason I got divorced from my first wife was she literally came to me and she said, I feel like you have forgotten that you have a wife and kids. And when she said that, all I heard was, you forgot about your kids. And I became super dad. I was doing everything with my kids, but I still wasn't doing anything really with my wife, Yeah. And it was because the way I grew up, it was like, if you're, providing, if you don't have any like, like if you don't have any crazy vices like alcohol, gambling, stuff like that. And if you don't cheat, you're solid.
Yeah.
That's kind of like how I grew up. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And then I learned after that, you kind of got to, just because you're married, you still got to kind of date your wife and all that stuff, which I learned the second time around. But anyway, that's like one of the reasons I got divorced the first time. So after that happened, I kind of started reassessing everything. And I remember the first thing I thought was, I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. I am. Well, because at the time I was divorced. I had 3 kids from 2 different women at the time. And my schedule, that schedule, I said, there's no way that I'm ever going to meet anybody who's going to be like, hey, let's go to dinner Wednesday. And I'm going to say, all right, cool, but it has to be early. Okay, we'll go at 6.
Dinner,
yeah. No, 4 o'clock, so, and then I thought about the weekends. I'm like, okay, the weekends I'm going to be with my kids. And eventually I'm going to meet a girl who's going to say, hey, how about we hang out on a weekend? And I'm going to say, oh, you're making me choose between my kids and you? Oh, I was like, I'm going to choose. Yeah. So I literally thought I was going to be single forever. But then I met my current wife, and for some reason she looked past the crazy baggage and something, but she taught me the balance of it. Like we'll do, like how you were saying, you the vacation without the kids and stuff. We'll do those regularly. We'll do, because of my schedule, once a week, I'll visit her at work and we'll do like a coffee date for like, it could be anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour. Little things like that go a long way. But it took me a while to learn that, I'm not going to lie. And like you said, it's individual for everybody.
It's individual. And I think so much of all of this is learning to ride the wave. That's the way that I think about it. So when you're having a really shitty day, or you're in a bad state with your mental health, whatever, you have to kind of accept that is your current state. And that doesn't mean that you accept that that's how it's going to be forever. And it doesn't mean you don't do anything to try to correct the problem. It's much more finding some sort of acceptance of, this is how I feel right now. It's not how I'll feel forever. I have to have faith that tomorrow the brain chemistry will change a little, and all the stuff that I'm doing to try to get myself back on track, whether it's exercise, spending time with my kids, snuggling with the dog, whatever it might be, the things that you do that tend to work, that you have to put faith that, okay, if it's tomorrow, if it's the day after that, or the day after that, I will come down from this wave. And so I've thought about that a lot as I've tried to get better. When I'm having a bad day, I go, here it is. Here's the wave. I got to ride the wave. And that helps. What I realized over time was that for me, that the wave was never going to stop crashing.
Yeah.
If I didn't start getting proper sleep and living a little bit more of a balanced life. And so that was just, that part of it was individual to me. But the piece is much more about every person trying to recognize, okay, so what are my triggers? What is causing me not to live the life that I want to live? What keeps me in that wave for longer than I'm comfortable with? And for me, it was, talking with my therapist and my psychiatrist, it was, they just said, look, as long as you're waking up at 2:00, your mental health issues are severe enough that you're just never going to get to where you want to be. And so I had to reckon with that. And then it was just a matter of, okay, well, what do I do next?
Yeah. So you have you were on that vacation with your wife. That's when you had to talk with her.
Yeah.
What did your wife? Is she working or is she stay at home?
She works, but mostly from home, which is great.
Okay.
She's a psychologist, but doesn't see clients. Like I said, I'm her number one.
Yeah,
client,
yeah.
And she's a research psychologist at this point.
Okay. So you're getting a little bit of money there, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, because we got to be practical here,
That was the thing.
Yeah.
And that I wrote in the piece that was exactly the problem I confronted next, was that you have this one truth, which is that men tend not to be open about their mental health problems. And society kind of told us for a long time that we shouldn't, right? That you needed to be strong and you don't talk about those things. That's changing, fortunately, but you have that one truth. And then the other truth is that society still expects us to provide. Surveys show that even the most progressive Americans feel a man should provide. Mm-hmm. And that is another thing that is changing over time, but it is still there. And I absolutely felt and still feel to this day an obligation to provide for my family. And I think that you could have an argument about whether that should be the case or whatever, but I was the breadwinner, so to speak. When I was working at WBZ, we built a life around that income. You buy a house that's in line with that income and a car, and you get your kids in camps and all that stuff, mm-hmm. and it aligns with what your income is. So I was looking at that going, okay, I can't keep doing this job, but it pays well enough that it's hard to go to something else without taking a big step back financially. And so I was starting to apply to stuff, and I was getting some responses back. I was getting some job offers, and I would look at the offer and go, I can't live in the house we live in,
right,
with this. And that's not like a woe is me thing. That's just, that was the scenario. So it took me a while to find the exit ramp, It's like I was looking for the exit ramp. And I knew that as soon as something presented itself that would allow us to not take a huge financial risk, I was going to take it.
Yeah. It's funny because I'll think to myself, like, there are times that I'm like, if I ever were to not do this, what would I get into? And I feel like I have a lot of good attributes, but I still I don't know what job I would put it towards. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm like, I don't want to be like a sales guy. I don't want to, the thought of like being in a cubicle or that type of thing gives me anxiety. Would be an understatement. I would. Yeah. So, okay. So now when you were like, you made the decision, how did you narrow it down as far as like what jobs you want to go for?
Yeah. Communications is the natural exit ramp for a journalist. You've dealt with people in communications your whole career, and you know how to communicate. And so you're well connected at that point. So I started looking at jobs in public relations and marketing and that kind of stuff. And basically what happened is another colleague of mine in the news business, Jackie Bruno, she and I were friends from way back when we'd report out in the field together. She had left her job at NBC Boston, and a couple of her friends who ran businesses had reached out to her and said, hey, I actually need some help with public relations, social media marketing, video storytelling. Do you think you could help me out with that? And she was telling me about this, and I was going, that's actually a great idea. Why don't you put some of these people on retainer and, see what you can do with getting them hits on the news and maybe helping them out with their social media channels, because we all have to do that for our job. And then it was, 2 small businesses, then it was 3, then it was 4. And I was kind of watching this on the side and helping her out here and there where I could, and just giving her advice on how to start a business and all this stuff. And then a year and a half in, she had been asking me all along, I know you're looking to get out. Do you want to join me as a partner? And the company wasn't big enough yet. It wasn't bringing in enough revenue where I could take that financial risk, but I was watching it grow from the sidelines. And finally it did get big enough where I said, okay, I hate my life enough right now with the morning schedule that I think it's time to jump and see if we can make this thing a success. And it's been an absolute whirlwind. It's, I'm the same as you. I could not have gone into a cubicle job and the typical 9-to-5 stuff and do the commute every day. Not for some people, that's great. I knew it wasn't for me. And this allows me to still be creative. We do a ton of video storytelling. We'll go in and meet a business and do kind of what we were doing on the news, where you bring in the cameras and you interview them and you get your B-roll and you tell the story of this business. You're just doing it for their channels, their social media channels, their website, their email marketing, and then also helping them with public relations. So calling up the news channels and saying, hey, there's a great local story here of a business that's making a difference or doing something really unique, depending on what the business is. And so it's allowed me to be creative, which I really wanted. And starting a business is a really fascinating. I know nothing about starting a business. I never pictured myself as an entrepreneur. I never pictured myself as someone's boss, because I'm just not good at managing people.
Yeah.
But
she brought you in to manage people.
Exactly. But it's been kind of awesome. It's you set your own schedule. There are days when I'm working 14 hours, but I take the 3 hours when my kids get off the bus until dinner time and do all that. And then I just do the work after they go to bed. So it's that flexibility that I never had before, that you wouldn't typically have. I get up in the morning, I make them their breakfast. I'm Mr. Dad, and get them on the bus. And then I just work until they get home. And then I take that 3 to 4 hours where it's just their time. And then I go back to work at night if I need to. And so it's been a great mix of all the different elements that I wanted in a job. Yeah.
So you thought your passion was one thing. It didn't turn out to be the way you wanted it. And you switched it to this. And now do you see yourself sticking with this, growing what you're doing now?
Yeah. I co-own the company, and we...
Wait, hold on. So you went from jobless to co-owning a company? So you called her up and you're like, hey, by the way, are you hiring still?
And by hiring, I mean making me a co-owner. Yeah. So, while she was growing the company, and then she brought on another partner, Rachel Robbins, who is this organizational genius. And she had been at a public relations agency for 10 years. So she had that background in public relations that Jackie and I don't. She had that expertise, and that really complemented what Jackie and I do well, because neither of us is great at organization or understanding balance sheets and all that stuff. That's Rachel's purview. And so Jackie and Rachel were co-owners.
Yeah.
But all along had been saying, if you come join us, you can be a co-owner. We want you to come join us. And so it was just a matter of time of building the client roster large enough that I could come on and it wouldn't cause a huge financial hit to them or to me.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, Liam. Doing pretty good. And our schedule's good. Getting your sleep.
Getting my sleep, man. I go to bed at the wife and I get in 10:30-ish or whatever. And then my son usually comes into the bed at 6:45, 7 o'clock. And my first day.
I'm so jealous. That's 8 hours.
Oh, it's the best. My first day on this new schedule, I had all kinds of mixed emotions. I really love WBZ and I love my coworkers there. So I had mixed emotions about it. And first day, 6:45 or whatever, the alarm clock goes off to get the kids up for school. And I hear my son scampering from his room, and he comes into our bed and snuggles in. And we just laid there slept for like another 15 minutes till the snoozer went off. And I was like, I made the right call.
Yeah.
I got my son in my arms, and then I went down and made them breakfast, and I was like, yes, this is, and I'm just like in my sweatpants all day, with the dog and making content and making phone calls and stuff, but mostly working from home. It's like 90% working from home.
Wow. My little kids are so used to my schedule that when they see me home, when they wake up, they're like, weekend. We know the weekend. Wow. Well, okay. So any regrets at all from making the switch or?
No regrets. Definitely. I had a morning process. I worked 15 years in TV news, and 90% of that, I thought this is all I'll do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Because I loved it. I really did. I loved covering politics. I loved getting out in the community, doing community stories. I love the camaraderie of a newsroom. I'm sure it's similar in a radio environment. Mm-hmm. It's unlike any other working environment. And then I really missed the people. Our morning show team is so funny, and you're all in the boat together. You all know what one another is going through, and so you build a real family. I had a real mourning period for letting go of all of that, but no regret about the decision itself.
You know what, though? The way, and I'm in radio, but radio's like getting antiquated. Some TV's getting antiquated. So it's like with what you're doing, you could still do what you were doing. The parts that you love of what you were doing, just in a different way. Like, I always argue with people about radio. I'm like, radio has one thing that we can offer people that we're not taking advantage of because people are so used to getting what they want when they want as many times as they want it as far as content. I said the only thing that radio has is the thing that sports has, which is people enjoying or experiencing something simultaneously with other people. Nobody does that anymore. So like we do some goofy thing at 8:30. Everyone who's listening at that time is experiencing it simultaneously and could be like, oh my God, you hear that this morning? Whatever, blah, 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 blah. But that's kind of going away because radio's not taking advantage of it. Now we're doing everything podcasts and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's, it used to be, for TV shows, The Sopranos or whatever, it's like Monday morning you're talking about The Sopranos.
Oh yeah, I know.
If you didn't watch it, you can't say like, oh, I didn't watch it. Well, too bad, leave the room. Now if you're watching somebody streaming The Sopranos and someone else is like, oh my God, isn't that show amazing? Don't tell me what happens. I'm only on season 2, episode 7. Yeah. So like we're missing out on that. But anyway, my point is like, radios and TV in a way are falling off because people now are getting, because of the algorithm or whatever, they're getting what they want or something similar to what they want, and they get it the way they want it. So you could still do those things.
Yeah, the loss of the shared experience is, I think, a pretty big problem
in
American society. In fact, it's not just television and radio and having these shared moments. The MASH series finale. It was, tens of millions of people watched that all at the same time, and they all would have talked about it the next day, and it was this shared thing. There was a time when there were 3 news networks in the country, and so everyone was in those news networks, say what you want about them, had a code of ethics, and they tried to do things in a certain way. They didn't always get it right, but the goal was the same for all of those networks. And so you'd all had kind of a shared sense of what was going on and what had happened. And now, as you say, everyone is getting the news that they want to hear. It's not the news that they need to hear or the news that actually happened. It's the news that they want.
And they don't realize it, though.
Oh, of course they don't.
They don't realize it.
And then you end up in that rabbit hole, and then you're going from one thing to the next, and the algorithm keeps leading you down this path. And that is a real problem. I think about even in like the 1950s, and we're going to take a real tangent here. Like the doctor and the CEO of the local company and the guy who worked on the assembly line at that local company all lived in the town, and they all went to the same diner, and their kids all went to the same school, and they were all watching the same news at night, and they were all watching the same television shows, and they had this shared experience that binded them.
Yep.
And now the CEO lives in the gated community in this town, and the doctor lives in this spot, and the guy on the assembly line lives obviously not there.
Right.
So, and they don't go to the same diner anymore, and their kids certainly don't go to the same schools, and the schools are not of the same quality. So you have this real division of the country, and it's showing up in every way. And now it's even down to what news they're getting.
Yeah.
And the CEO is interested in getting a certain type of news that's going to suit his or her agenda, their viewpoint, what they want to hear, and then down the line there from the doctor and then the assembly line worker. So we're being segregated in all kinds of ways that we don't even realize, and that's I think ripping at the fabric of the country.
And it's scary that people don't realize that. I'm like, put on different news channels, you'll get the same story, but on this channel it's like a hero story. On this channel it's a villain story. You need to understand, people, like you said, everyone has an agenda in a way, but which brings me to what news out there, because I feel like I don't want, it's not even like I'm like, oh, I figured this out. I just feel like I have a not super trusting nature in general. I really do. Like if somebody's like is extra nice, I'm like, why are you being extra nice right now? Why are you being so nice? So I always approach everything like that. Like, what's your real motive behind this? What news organization or site or something would you think is right now the most
trustworthy?
Just reporting what's happening, giving this is what's happening. We're not going to say it's a good thing, bad thing, whatever. Yeah, trustworthy.
Oof. So I hesitate to say none, because I do think that some are doing a better job than others. So what I do is I just try to get news from a bunch of different sources, and then I can kind of figure out for myself, okay, here's what I think this boils down to. So before I give you those, I will tell you that I have loved detaching from the news in these last few weeks, which is a little bit sad to say, because I love the news. Obviously, that's what I did for 15 years. And before that, I grew up in a family that watched the news and was interested in what was going on. And my mom and dad would talk about, stuff that was happening in society. And so I have always valued being informed. But there has been something nice about just being ignorant the last few weeks of everything that's going on. Like I said to my wife the other day, I was like, what's happening in Trump's hush money trial? She was like, well, I think they selected some jurors. And I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, that's about as much as I need to know. So I will listen to NPR if I'm in the car. I'll check out New York Times. I'll look at the Wall Street Journal. I will go to Fox News to see how they're putting a headline onto something, and I'll check out CNN. And if it's a story I'm interested in, I truly will go to all those to see how they are covering it and what facts they might have to offer on it. And then from there, I can try to make an educated decision about here's what the actual truth is. But to expect an average person who hasn't been in news their whole life, seeing these things, to do that is unrealistic. They're gonna likely just go to one spot and see what it says, and then that's gonna stay with them for the day, and that's gonna help them make their decisions about whom they're voting for and all that. So it's a problem. It is.
Whenever I hear someone say, you overhear conversation, or even like most of your friends, like, oh my God, everyone's talking about this. I'm like, no, they're not. Your feed is talking about that. Everybody, because they know you like to hear that nonsense. It really is. I try, kind of like you said, I go to everything and I'm like, okay, that way I kind of get sucked into the algorithm of like, oh, this story from this end and the same story from a different end type of thing. But
Right.
Figuring out who to trust, it's impossible these days.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Your Instagram algorithm, what's popping up there most?
Okay, so my Instagram algorithm is it's reckless. It's
Like people getting injured and stuff?
100%.
Yeah,
It's people messing with, I'll have friends who are like, "Oh, did you see this new latest dance craze or whatever?" I'm like, that is not my algorithm. Nobody dances on my algorithm.
Yeah.
Friends at work hurt each other. People play tricks on each other.
Yeah.
People fall downstairs.
Dude broke his leg working out at the gym. Dog
gym
videos.
injuries. I can tell you right now, it's gym injuries.
Gym injuries is big on mine.
Yep. For some reason, construction worker injury.
I need to get into that one.
It's the most ridiculous. But I know that's what I go. I don't go to my social media for news.
Right. No. Same.
I go for people getting injured. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Never mind. Liam, well, anyway, thank you for coming in. This was
great.
This was really fun, and good luck with everything. I hope everyone, listening to this, you learn the lesson of sometimes what you think is like the ultimate might not be the ultimate for you. But you can still figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do with this podcast, because everyone has different stories of, this is what I wanted as a little kid and I chased it and I got it and it's amazing. And some people are, they go, this is what I wanted as a little kid. And then one day I met this guy and there was this thing that I never knew existed. And I was like, oh, let me try that. And now I'm doing it and it's awesome. And getting people's ups and downs, most importantly.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people will look at somebody and the worst thing you could do is compare the chapter of the book that you're in with a chapter of the book somebody else is in. And you see their happy chapter and you go, oh, I'm doing it all wrong. Let me quit. Don't ever quit, because you never know. That's pretty much it. So thank you for coming on, Liam.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a great idea for a podcast. And as you say, you set a dream and you have to be willing to let the dream shift.
Right.
And take each day and sort of, take stock of it and see, am I happy? Am I on the right path for myself? And be willing to make a shift if you're not.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.